Something is lying in the desert sand at Aswan, Egypt, that has not moved in 3,500 years. It is not a pyramid. It is not a temple. It is not a tomb. It is a failure. The abandoned wreckage of the most ambitious stone-cutting project in the ancient world, left exactly where it was dropped the moment its creators realized something had gone wrong. And it is 1,000 to 200 tons of solid pink granite, still half attached to the bedrock it was carved from, its surface covered in marks that archaeologists have been staring at for over a century without being able to fully explain. In early 2026, a wave of videos swept across YouTube claiming that Grok AI, the artificial intelligence system built by Elon Musk's xAI, had analyzed these marks in high resolution and concluded that they could only have been made by machine-guided cutting tools, that ancient Egypt possessed, or was given, technology far beyond what historians will admit, that scientists had seen the results and had no explanation. Here is what you need to know before we go any further. That specific claim, the Grok analysis, the precise measurements of 5% size variation and 3% spacing consistency, the conclusion about machine guidance, does not exist in any peer-reviewed paper, any official xAI publication, or any verifiable scientific source anywhere. Fact-checkers who searched specifically for the study found nothing. The claim exists only in a circle of YouTube channels and content farm websites citing each other, the numbers copied and pasted from script to script, with no original source behind any of them. It is fabricated. And naming it as fabricated matters because the real story of how Egypt cut granite is genuinely mysterious enough, genuinely debated enough, and genuinely unsolved enough that it does not need invention to hold your attention. This is that real story, and it is stranger than the viral version. Reginald Engelbach was a British archaeologist working in Egypt in the 1920s, when he first properly documented the object that would eventually be called the unfinished obelisk of Aswan. He found it buried under centuries of accumulated sand in the northern quarries just south of the city of Aswan, where the ancient Egyptians had come for generations to extract the red and pink granite that built their most enduring monuments. 3 sides of the obelisk had been carved. The 4th was still attached to the living rock below it. Its intended dimensions were extraordinary. 41.75 meters long, 4 meters wide at the base, and, at completion, the single heaviest piece of stone ever fashioned by ancient Egyptian hands. 1,197 tons of granite. Nearly 1,200 tons. To put that number in physical terms, your body can process. The Statue of Liberty, torch to toe, weighs approximately 225 tons. The unfinished obelisk would have weighed more than 5 of them stacked together. It would have been a third larger than any obelisk the ancient Egyptians ever successfully raised. The Lateran obelisk, currently standing in Rome, the largest standing ancient obelisk in the world, weighs 455 tons. The unfinished obelisk at Aswan would have dwarfed it. It was commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut, the 5th pharaoh of Egypt's 18th dynasty, a woman who ruled one of the most powerful civilizations in the ancient world for over 20 years and built on a scale that still stuns modern engineers. Hatshepsut's reign ran from approximately 1479 to 1458 BCE. The obelisk was almost certainly intended to complement the Lateran obelisk at Karnak, to stand beside it as a pair, as obelisks typically did, in the great temple complex at the heart of Egyptian religious life. It never got there. At a late stage of the quarrying, after months, possibly years of labor, a crack appeared in the granite. Not just a surface crack, a flaw that ran deep into the rock, compromising the structural integrity of the entire piece. The ancient stonemasons stopped work immediately. They left their tools, they left their ochre guidelines, the painted lines used to direct the cutting, still visible on the surface. They left everything exactly as it was, and they walked away. And the obelisk has been lying there ever since, in the same position, in the same quarry, undisturbed, for approximately 3,500 years. What Engelbach found when the sand was cleared was not just an unfinished monument. It was an open textbook, a frozen moment in an ancient manufacturing process, with every stage of the work preserved exactly as it had been left. The quarry around it tells the story of how Egypt worked stone, and that story, the closer you look at it, raises questions that remain genuinely uncomfortably open. The standard explanation for how ancient Egyptians cut granite, the explanation taught in archaeology courses, presented in museum exhibits and defended by figures including Mark Lanner, arguably the most prominent Egyptologist in the world, centers on a tool so primitive it seems almost impossible to reconcile with the results it supposedly produced, the Dolerite pounder. Dolerite is an igneous rock, dark and extremely dense, harder than granite on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. Thousands of Dolerite hammerstones have been excavated from quarry sites across Egypt, including at Aswan, in sizes ranging from small handheld tools to boulders weighing several kilograms. The theory is that Egyptian workers gripped these stones and used them to pound the granite surface repeatedly, not to cut it cleanly. but to pulverize it grain by grain, removing material slowly and methodically through sheer repeated impact. Channels were pounded into the granite around the intended block or obelisk, deeper and deeper, until the stone could be separated from the parent rock using wooden wedges driven into slots and then soaked with water to expand. PBS Nova documented a modern attempt to quarry granite using this method. The experimenters used real Dolerite pounders and real granite and pounded for hours. They confirmed that it works, that Dolerite on granite does remove material, that channels can be created, that the basic theory is not physically impossible. Mark Lenner has pointed to the Dolerite tools found in their thousands at Aswan as the most direct physical evidence of how the work was done. All the tools needed to perform the operations, Lenner has argued, have been found archaeologically, but the experiment revealed something important at the same time. It is slow, extremely slow. And in 2023, a team of researchers published a peer-reviewed study in the journal Archaeological and Anthropological Sciences, specifically addressing this problem for the unfinished obelisk. Using photogrammetric measurement, three-dimensional scanning of the quarry marks on the obelisk surface, they conducted a controlled experiment pounding granite with a real Dolerite pounder at 85 strikes per minute and measured the exact volume of material removed. The result was 216 cubic centimeters per hour. That number sounds technical, so let us translate it into something you can picture. At that rate, working a 10-hour day, 7 days a week, with no rest and no interruption, a single worker with a Dolerite pounder would remove roughly 2,160 cubic centimeters of granite per day. The unfinished obelisk required the removal of an enormous volume of material from all sides. When you calculate how many worker hours of Dolerite pounding would have been required to carve this single obelisk to the stage at which it was abandoned, the numbers become difficult to square with the timeline of a single reign. The authors of the 2023 study stated their conclusion directly. The results argue against the use of only Dolerite pounders in this process and support the employment of different quarrying methods as well. That is not a fringe website. That is not a YouTube conspiracy channel. That is a peer-reviewed, published scientific study conducted at the actual quarry site using actual tools, stating clearly that Dolerite pounding alone is insufficient to explain the unfinished obelisk. So, what else was used? This is where the documented evidence becomes genuinely fascinating, and where the real debate among serious researchers lives. A debate that has nothing to do with Grok AI or lost civilizations, and everything to do with careful archaeology and experimental science. The first alternative method, supported by physical evidence, is copper sawing with abrasive slurry. Archaeologist Dennis Stocks spent years experimentally reconstructing ancient Egyptian stone-cutting techniques and published his results in peer-reviewed literature. He built a copper saw to ancient specifications, a blade 1.8 meters long, 15 centimeters wide, and 6 millimeters thick, weighing 14.5 kilograms, and tested it against Aswan granite using dry quartz sand as an abrasive. Copper is softer than granite, but that is precisely the point. The copper blade embeds sharp, angular quartz grains into its cutting edge, and it is those grains, dragged repeatedly across the granite surface, that do the actual cutting. Remains of this process have been found in ancient cuts in Egyptian stone. A green staining from copper oxidation still visible in the rock, the chemical fingerprint of a tool used thousands of years ago. Stocks's experiments confirmed that this method works. Parallel striations on the cut surface of his test granite matched patterns observed on ancient Egyptian artifacts. The process was slow. Cutting rates for copper tube drilling of granite with dry quartz sand abrasive were measured at approximately 5.2 cubic centimeters per hour. But it was controllable, repeatable, and capable of producing the kind of smooth, consistent surfaces observed on finished Egyptian granite work. Spiral grooves found on ancient Egyptian drill cores, one of the features most often cited by people who argue that only modern machinery could have produced them, were replicated exactly using a rotating tubular copper drill with abrasive slurry. No mystery machine required. Just copper, sand, rotation, and time. The second method, supported by physical evidence, is fire setting. Excavators at the Aswan quarry sites found charcoal, ash, and burned mud bricks, the physical remains of fires set against the granite faces. Fire setting was a quarrying technique used in many ancient cultures. Heat the rock face rapidly and intensely, then cool it suddenly with water. The thermal shock creates fractures along natural crystal boundaries in the granite, weakening it and making subsequent pounding far more effective. Experimental archaeology has confirmed that fire setting on granite produces exactly the kind of broad, smooth curved depressions that are visible on the quarry walls at Aswan. The same marks that the viral Grok AI videos claim could only have been made by precision machines. Fire, water, thermal shock, Dolerite, copper, sand. These are not exotic technologies. They are not advanced machinery from a lost civilization. They are the tools of people who were extraordinarily good at understanding materials and at applying sustained, organized, intelligent effort to problems that would defeat most modern individuals working alone. And they leave physical traces in the archaeological record at Aswan that have been there, available for examination for decades. And yet, here is the part that the standard explanation handles less comfortably. Here is where the genuine unresolved question sits, separate from the fabricated Grok claim, but no less interesting for being real. When Flinders Petrie, one of the founding fathers of scientific archaeology, a meticulous measurer who brought precision instruments to Egypt in the 1880s, examined granite artifacts in detail, he found things that troubled him. He documented drill cores from ancient Egypt, showing spiral grooves cut into granite with a feed rate, the depth of cut per rotation, of by approximately 2.5 millimeters per revolution. Modern diamond-tipped drills cutting granite today, driven by electric motors, typically achieve a feed rate of around 0.1 millimeters per revolution. Petrie's measurement, if accurate, suggests the ancient drill was cutting into granite 25 times faster per rotation than a modern diamond drill. Petrie himself found this so difficult to explain with known tools that he suggested the Egyptians might have used jewel-tipped drill bits, possibly set with corundum or other very hard minerals. This specific observation by Petrie is real. It is documented. It has never been satisfactorily explained by experimental archaeology. Stocks's experiments produced spiral grooves, yes, but at much shallower feed rates than what Petrie measured in ancient artifacts. The gap between what the known tools demonstrably achieve in experimental conditions and what the actual ancient artifacts appear to show has not been fully closed. Egyptologist Mark Lehner and others have argued that variations in stone composition, differences in measurement technique, and the cumulative effect of skilled, experienced workers over long periods could account for the discrepancy. They may be right, but may be right, and is proven, are not the same thing, and intellectually honest archaeology acknowledges the difference. What makes this genuinely interesting rather than merely controversial is that the question does not require a lost civilization or alien intervention to become fascinating. It requires only the acknowledgement that a culture capable of organizing 10,000 workers to build the Great Pyramid, capable of raising a 455-ton obelisk without cranes or steel cables, capable of cutting and polishing granite sarcophagi to tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter, the culture was probably far more technically sophisticated in its stoneworking methods than the simple hit it with a rock model fully captures. The real question is not whether ancient Egyptians could work granite. The physical evidence proves beyond any reasonable doubt that they could. The real question is how fully we understand the methods they used to do it. And the honest answer, the one that peer-reviewed science has actually arrived at, is not completely. The unfinished obelisk lies in that quarry today exactly as Hatshepsut's workers left it. The ochre lines they painted to guide the cutting are still faintly visible. The channels pounded around 3 of its 4 sides are still there, as deep as they were the day the crack was discovered. It is open to visitors, an outdoor museum managed by the Egyptian government, where you can walk up to the largest piece of stone ever attempted by ancient hands and stand next to it and feel, in whatever way these things are felt, the scale of the ambition it represents. No viral video needed, no fabricated AI analysis required, just 200 tons of pink Aswan granite, lying on its side in the desert, covered in marks that a 2023 peer-reviewed scientific study confirmed cannot be entirely explained by Dolerite pounding alone, and surrounded by the physical evidence of fire, copper, sand, water, and thousands of human beings working with a precision and a sophistication that we are still, 3,500 years later, working to fully understand. That is the real story. It is not as clean as Grok AI found the answer. It does not tie everything up with a revelation that shocked scientists into silence. What it offers instead is something rarer and more valuable than a viral headline. A genuine open question, backed by real science, sitting in a real quarry, attached to a real piece of stone that has been waiting 3,500 years for someone to finally figure out how it was meant to be finished. We have not figured it out yet, not entirely, and that the actual uncertainty, the real gap between what we know and what we can prove, is a mystery far more honest and far more interesting than anything a fabricated AI analysis could manufacture.